You already know how attraction works. Guy meets girl, guy shows interest, girl either likes him back or she doesn't. Simple. You've lived this 100 times. You think you understand it. You don't. Not even close. And the proof is in the fact that every time you've really wanted it to work, really tried, it didn't. And every time you weren't even thinking about it, something clicked that you couldn't explain. You felt that. You just never understood why. But by the end of this video, you will. I spent a long time chasing an answer to that gap. And there's a story I'm going to tell you later in this video. A night I thought I had everything figured out. That broke everything I thought I knew about this. You'll want to hear it. But if you've ever stared at her texts, trying to decode whether she actually wants you or just wants your attention when nothing else is going on, I wrote a book for exactly that confusion. It's called The Truth Detector: How to Know What She Really Wants, if she's using you, and when she's playing games. First link in the description. What you'll learn here today connects directly to what's inside it. Go check it out after this. Now, here's where things get uncomfortable. You've been told that showing a woman you like her is how you get her to like you back. Makes sense on paper. So you do it. You text first, you compliment her, you make plans, you show up, you're real with her, honest, present, everything a good guy is supposed to be. And for a moment, it feels like it's working. She's warm, she's responding. Then slowly, quietly, something changes. She's a little harder to reach, a little less excited. The energy that was there starts to thin out, and you can feel it happening, but you can't figure out why, because you haven't changed anything. You're still doing everything right. But that's the part nobody explains, because the problem isn't what you're doing. The problem is what your actions are communicating without you realizing it. Every text you send first, every plan you make, every time you laugh a little too fast at something she says, you think you're building connection. But there's a signal underneath all of it that her brain is picking up loud and clear, a signal you never meant to send. And once she receives it enough times, the attraction quietly starts to die. Here's what that signal is. When you consistently show a woman that she already has your attention without her doing much to earn it, you accidentally answer the one question that was keeping her curious about you. And the moment that question gets answered, the pull disappears. But the solution isn't to pull away. It isn't to go cold or play games or pretend you don't care. Every guy who's tried that knows exactly how badly it blows up. The actual shift is something quieter than that, something most men never find because they keep looking for a new tactic when what needs to change isn't a tactic at all. It's something happening inside you before you ever open your mouth, before you send a single text, before you even walk into the room. And once you understand what it is, genuinely understand it, everything changes. The effort stops and the attraction starts. That's what this video is about, and we're just getting started. Let me tell you about that night I mentioned. I was at a rooftop bar. She was someone I'd been talking to for about 3 weeks. Smart, funny, the kind of woman who makes you want to say something clever just to see her react. I had done everything by the book, consistent without being clingy, interested without being desperate. I thought I had finally cracked it. So that night I decided to just be real. Tell her I liked where things were going. Let her know I was in. She smiled. She said that was really sweet. And then over the next 2 weeks, she slowly disappeared. I replayed that night 100 times trying to figure out what went wrong. The timing, the words I used, maybe I came on too strong, but none of those answers felt right because the truth, the real truth, had nothing to do with what I said that night. It had everything to do with what I'd already been communicating for 3 weeks before I ever opened my mouth on that rooftop. By the time I told her I was interested, she'd already known for weeks. I hadn't built tension. I'd been slowly releasing it, and that night was just the moment the last bit of air finally left the room. So, what should I have done differently? That's the question, right? And here's where most advice completely falls apart, because most advice will tell you to play it cooler, text less, seem busier, create mystery. And sure, those things can work on the surface, but they're still performances. You're still managing her perception of you. You're still trying, just trying in a different costume. And she can feel that too, eventually. The real shift is this, and pay attention here, because this is the thing. Behavioral psychologist Albert Mehrabian's work on communication showed something that most people misquote, but the core of it is real. The feeling behind your words lands harder than the words themselves. What this means in practice is that a woman doesn't just hear what you say, she feels the energy underneath it. She feels whether you need her approval or you don't. She feels whether her reaction controls your mood or it doesn't. She feels whether you were going to be fine before she walked in and whether you'll be fine if she walks out. And that feeling, that specific energy, is either attractive or it isn't. No amount of good lines can fake it. No tactic can manufacture it. It either lives in you or it doesn't. This is what the guys who attract without trying actually have. Not better looks, not better game. A genuine, unshakable sense that they are the prize. Not in an arrogant way. Not in the way they have to announce, but in the way they carry themselves when nobody is watching. When she's not around. When there's no one to impress. The man they are in private bleeds into the man they are in public. And women feel it instantly. But here's the gap most men never close. You can understand all of this intellectually and still go home alone, because knowing the principle and actually living it are two completely different things. Most men who hear "be the prize" nod along and then go right back to checking if she's viewed their story, because the information isn't the problem, the wiring is. And rewiring takes more than a mindset shift. It takes specific, practical changes to how you move through the world day to day, not just around women, everywhere. But this is exactly where it gets interesting, because the changes I'm talking about aren't what you'd expect. They're not gym routines and cold showers, though those don't hurt, but they're quieter than that, more internal, and in some ways more uncomfortable, because they require you to look at some habits you've probably never identified as the problem. But there's one in particular that almost every guy has. It's so normal, so automatic, that you'd never think of it as something working against you, but it is, constantly. And once I point it out, you're going to start noticing yourself doing it everywhere, with women, with friends, at work, with strangers. It's that deeply ingrained. But what is it? We're getting there. But first, you need to understand the environment this habit was built in, because without that context, the fix won't make sense. And I'd rather you understand this fully than just hand you another thing to try. You grew up learning from watching how the world responded to you. That approval is something you earn. You do well. People are pleased. You perform. People clap. You adjust yourself to the room. Things go smoother. This isn't a flaw. It's just conditioning. It's how most people are wired by the time they're adults. The problem is what happens when you carry that wiring into attraction. Because when you're wired for approval, every interaction with a woman becomes a test. Not consciously. You're not standing there thinking, I need her to like me. But underneath every joke you tell, every text you craft, every story you share, there's a quiet question running in the background. Did that land? Does she think I'm interesting? Is she still into this? And your body responds to that question whether you want it to or not. Your energy shifts. You get a little more careful, a little more managed, a little less like yourself. And she feels all of it, even when she can't name it. This is the habit, approval seeking. Constant, automatic, invisible approval seeking. And it doesn't look like desperation. That's why it's so dangerous. It looks like being attentive. It looks like being interested. It looks like being a good guy. But underneath the surface, it's a man who needs the interaction to go well. And that need is louder than anything he says out loud. But think about the last time you were around a woman you genuinely didn't care about impressing. Maybe a colleague you had zero interest in. Maybe someone you just met at a friend's place. You were relaxed. You said whatever came to mind. You didn't monitor her reactions. You weren't performing. And here's the part that stings. She probably found you more interesting in that conversation than women you've actually tried to attract have found you in weeks, because you weren't seeking anything. And people, women especially, are magnetically drawn to someone who genuinely doesn't need anything from them. That's not a coincidence. That's psychology. And here's where most advice stops. Just stop caring what she thinks. Brilliant. Very helpful. Like telling someone with insomnia to just fall asleep. The advice is technically correct and completely useless without understanding what to replace the caring with, because you can't just remove something from the inside and leave a hole there. Nature fills holes, and if you try to force yourself to stop seeking approval without building something real in its place, you'll either go back to the old pattern within a week or swing to the opposite extreme and become someone who's cold and unavailable, which is its own kind of performance. So what fills the hole? That shift from making her the center of your attention to making your life the center of your attention is the entire game. everything else, every tactic, every line, every piece of dating advice you've ever consumed is downstream of this one thing. Get this right and the rest handles itself. Miss this and no amount of surface level strategy will save you. But here's where I want to pause for a second, because everything we've talked about up to this point, the approval seeking, the certainty killing curiosity, the energy she feels before you say a word, this is all connected to something deeper, something about reading people, reading situations, knowing without being told what's actually happening versus what's being performed for you. And that goes both ways, because while you're working on becoming someone who doesn't seek her approval, you also need to know when she's playing a game with yours. That's exactly what my book, The Truth Detector, is built for. It's not just about attraction, it's about clarity, knowing what she actually wants, knowing when you're being strung along, knowing when the signals are real and when they're not. First link in the description. If any part of what we've been talking about today has made you realize you've been reading situations wrong, that book is where you go next. It's going to save you a lot of time and a lot of unnecessary pain. Now, we've talked about the inner shift. We've talked about what approval seeking actually looks like and where it comes from. But there's one final piece that ties all of this together, and it's the most practical part of everything in this video. It's the actual behavior, the day-to-day thing you do differently starting today, not the mindset, the move, the specific, concrete change in how you show up, in conversations, in texts, in the moments right after you meet someone. That communicates everything we've talked about without you ever having to say a word. That's the last piece, and it's coming right now. Here's the move, and it's simpler than you're expecting, which is exactly why most men never take it seriously. Stop making her the most interesting thing in the room. Not coldly, not rudely, not as a power move you've calculated in advance, but genuinely from a real place of having other things going on inside your head that matter to you. Because right now, when you're talking to a woman you're attracted to, something subtle happens to your attention. It narrows. She becomes the whole frame. Every word she says lands with more weight than it should. Every pause in the conversation feels loaded. You're reading every micro expression, every response time, every shift in her body language, not because you're perceptive, but because you're anxious. And that anxiety is visible, not as sweat or stuttering, as intensity, as a man who is a little too focused on one thing. And that focus, ironically, is exactly what makes you less attractive in the moment you're trying hardest to be attractive. The fix isn't to care less about her, it's to care more about everything else. When you're talking to her, be in the conversation, but let your mind stay connected to the rest of your world, the project you're working on, the trip you're planning, the thing that happened this week that genuinely has your attention. Let those things exist in the room with you, because a man whose inner world is full doesn't have the bandwidth to obsess over her reaction to every sentence. He's just talking, naturally, easily, like a man who has a life and just invited her to briefly peek inside it. That's the energy. That's what she feels. And that feeling of a man who is going somewhere with or without her is the most attractive thing you can communicate, without trying, without performing, without saying a single word about it. But I know some of you are going to watch this video, feel the truth of everything in it, and still go back to the same patterns by Friday. Not because you're weak, because insight alone doesn't change behavior. You can understand exactly why you're doing something and still do it, because the pattern is older than the understanding. This is why the work has to be daily, not grand gestures, not a complete personality overhaul over one weekend. Small, consistent choices. Every time you feel the pull to check if she viewed your story, don't. Every time you draft a text and then redraft it to sound cooler, send the first one or send nothing. Every time you feel yourself shrinking slightly to fit what you think she wants, notice it. Stand back up. Not for her, for you. Because here's the raw truth underneath all of this. Attraction without trying isn't a technique, it's a byproduct. It's what happens naturally when a man is so invested in becoming someone he respects, someone with direction, standards, and a life that doesn't pause for anyone's approval, that the energy of that investment starts radiating outward without effort. Women don't fall for that man because he's playing a game. They fall for him because being around him feels different. He makes them feel something they can't fully explain and can't easily forget. And that feeling has a name. It's called presence. Real, unperformed, unmanaged presence, the kind that only exists when you stop trying to manufacture it. Screenshot this if you need to. Try it this week, not as a test on her, as an experiment on yourself. Notice how many times in a single conversation you check her reaction before finishing your own thought. Notice how many times you adjust mid-sentence based on how she looks. That's the habit. That's the thing to break. Drop your experience in the comments. I read them. And if you're sitting with any part of this feeling, like you've been misreading the signals, like you're not sure what's genuine interest and what's just a woman keeping you warm as a backup option, that's not a feeling you should have to guess through. The Truth Detector was written for exactly that. It's in the first link in the description. It's the clearest, most direct tool I know for cutting through the noise and finally understanding what's actually happening versus what you're hoping is happening. Go get it. One last thing before you go. You came into this video thinking you understood attraction. Guy meets girl. Guy tries. Girl either bites or she doesn't. But now you know the trying is the problem. Not the amount of it, the energy of it, the need underneath it. Fix the need and the trying disappears on its own. And when the trying disappears, that's when she starts wondering about you. That's when she leans in. That's when the dynamic you've been chasing finally shows up. Not because you earned it, because you stopped needing it. But if you're still here, it means one of two things. It's either that you found this information valuable or you need more answers. Either way, YouTube thinks you'll really enjoy this video over here. So click on it and I'll see you there.